In this video, we're going to summarize how to solve quadratic equations by factoring, and this is the main focus of our first progress check this semester. The learning targets addressed on this progress check are to apply the zero product property and to solve quadratic equations by factoring, which is an example of an application of the zero product property. So first we'll talk about what the zero product property is. And it states that if you multiply two factors together and the result is 0, then one of the factors must be equal to 0. And that's shown symbolically there at the bottom. So A and B represent the two factors. If you multiply them together and it equals 0, then that means that either A has to be equal to 0 or B has to be equal to 0. And so there are two possibilities when we multiply things together and get 0. It gives us two possibilities for our solutions. So typically we'll be writing our quadratic equations in factored form, where there will be two things within those parentheses. And so this property states that one of those has to be equal to 0 for this to be true. So the steps that we want to go through for this process to solve a quadratic equation by factoring is we want to start by making sure that the equation is equal to 0. That's how we can use the zero product property. Second step is to write the equation in factored form. Then we set each factor equal to 0 and solve for the variable. So here's our first example, x squared plus 8x plus 16. Our first step is to make sure that the equation is equal to 0. In this case, the equal sign was missing on the slide, so I went ahead and added it in there and set the equation equal to 0. Step 2, we want to factor the equation. This quadratic equation matches the quadratic factoring pattern of simple quadratic factoring. You'll find that on your factoring flowchart on handout 2. So we want to set up two sets of parentheses, and we need to choose two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to 8. We'll put our x's in the front. That's where our x squared comes from. Both of these will be addition because we're adding to a positive number and multiplying to a positive number. And then the two numbers that fit this pattern are 4 and 4. Steps 3 and 4, we want to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve. So we'll set x plus 4 equal to 0 and our other factor, x plus 4 equal to 0. Then we'll solve each of those equations for x. We'll do that by subtracting 4 from both sides. That gives us our first solution. And since our second factor is the same, that would give us the same solution. So overall, this equation has only one answer, and that is x is equal to 4. Sorry, x is equal to negative 4. There we go. Example 2, x squared minus 25 equals 0. Again, step 1, we want to make sure that the equation is equal to 0. In this case, it's already equal to 0. Step 2, we want to write the equation in factored form. This fits the pattern of difference of two squares. So we can set up our two parentheses. We'll put x's in the front. That tells us where the x squared comes from. One will have an addition sign and one will have a subtraction sign. And then the numbers that go in the back are the numbers that multiply to negative 25. And they need to match. So that would be positive 5 and negative 5. Next thing we want to do is set the factors equal to 0 and solve. So we'll take x plus 5 equals 0 and x minus 5 equals 0. In the first equation, we'll subtract 5 from both sides to get x equals negative 5. And in the second equation, we will add 5 to both sides to get x equals positive 5. And so our solutions to this equation are x equals 5 and negative 5.